Hello and welcome to Champ Select, your go-to competitive Legends of Runeterra podcast. I'm Alex, as per usual. Joining me is my co-host, Hugh.
Hello.
Somewhat unfortunately, we are, however, missing Noble this week. He is attending a gaming conference in Minnesota, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So
That sounds
he's on the
right.
road, touring, advertising a game that we worked on a little bit in the past called Ivian. If anybody wants to check it out. Okay, anyway, but that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about Legends of Runeterra today. We've got sort of a little bit of an interim here, right before World starts. It's kind of the thing on people's minds. We got that coming up. But regardless, today we wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the mental side of the game. It's been a little while since we've actually gotten to do this. I know this is like some of our favorite episodes, and we kind of had to take a break because there's only so much to be said. But I think that enough time has passed now that we've got enough new things to say, enough fresh ideas that I think it's about time we revisit it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we have someone actually nailed it for the question of the week this time.
I don't know how they keep doing it. Like every time we're like, all right, we have these ideas for things we want to talk about. All right, let's go and get the poll for questions. And every single time, somebody just nails it, knocks it out of the park. So you guys are absolutely killing it with the questions. But without further ado, I think let's just get it off. Our question of the week this week comes from Leovold. They ask, what is the go-to way for each of you dealing with burnout? Whether it's LOR or something else that you grow weary of. And I think this is a big topic for people, especially of late, because, the game's been out for a long time, right? People are, there was a lot of burnout that we had to deal with, especially through, at least for me, the Azir Irelia sort of meta. And I'm pretty happy to report that I think I've really kind of come out of that downswing pretty happy. So I actually am really excited to talk about this.
Yeah, I feel similarly. I am definitely not. I'm not quite as energized as Alex is, but the game is in a very good place right now. I think, in spite of the rampant complaints, as per usual on the subreddit, which surprising no one. Everyone's complaining about things, and there are legitimate complaints to be had. I'm not saying that this meta is perfect by any means, but we're in a pretty decent place. There are some points of contention. Probably the most controversial card in the game right now, I would say, is Minimorph or Bandle City.
I was actually okay. So here's a good sign. I was gonna say that I think the most controversial card right now is Nami,
and that was number 3. But I think she's number 3. But
wow.
I'm glad you feel that way because
Yeah. That's a good sign right there. If I like to be honest, is like, if we already can't really agree what the most controversial card is, the meta's probably pretty healthy. But regardless, we're gonna have a lot of meta to talk about next week after Worlds and all that. So this week, we really want to focus on how do you deal with continuing to grind the game, especially when the main form of competition in this game is ladder, which is kind of a gripe for a lot of people. And, it's really hard to do really anything in the competitive scene of Legends of Runeterra unless you're grinding ladder really hard, because, you've got to be top 700 masters at the end of the season in order to qualify for the seasonal. The seasonal is basically qualifying you for Worlds, it's qualifying you for most of the tournaments. And there are, community tournaments that are held pretty much every weekend and all that. And those are a great way to play competitive Legends of Runeterra. But they just, there's no world championship for community tournaments, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, everyone who wants to play this game at the highest level is trying to qualify for Worlds, and everyone who cares a lot really wants to be getting the points, whether it be from ladder or the seasonal. And you kind of have to do both to really solidify a spot in this tournament.
Yeah, and that's like one of the things that I think a lot of people are missing. And that's actually my first tip for how to deal with burnout in Legends of Runeterra. And that's that, I think that people, me included, I actually was really guilty of this. Looking back at my previous Legends of Runeterra career, they really hyper focus on the ladder part of that competitive scene, and it makes a lot of sense. Ladder is how you qualify for the tournament, right? Like, you can't be a garbage ladder player and you won't even make it to the seasonal, right? If you're hard stuck in gold, like, you can't. You don't even have dreams of getting top 700, right? Like, you need to focus on your ladder play first. But I think for the players that are kind of on the verge, one of the things that really helped me kind of get out of the burnout was playing more tournament style Legends of Runeterra. Like, it's really so different from ladder. Like, it's a real breath of fresh air. At least I thought so. I mean, I spent a lot of time last season, I've talked about it before, playing tournaments, thinking about tournaments and that type of thing. And that made me excited to play ladder because I wanted to test decks to play in the tournaments. And then the tournaments made me excited. So I wanted to play ladder so that I could try things for the tournaments. And then, my various tournament results made me want to try ladder to get better at these things. But you do need to do well in the seasonal tournament, right? Like, if your goal is to make worlds, do well in these seasonal tournaments, like, I think people are kind of clinically ignoring that side of the competitive play is one of the things I've realized.
Yeah, and if they're not, and even if it's not a completely ignoring it, it is neglecting it to a point that there's a huge disparity in how much effort people are focusing on ladder versus tournament play. And in general, people are just really, really focused on just hitting top 700 when honestly, I think that focusing on being good at tournament play is just way, way more important in general because you get more points towards worlds from the seasonal than you do from ladder. And yes, you do need to ladder to qualify for the seasonal, but there is also the last chance gauntlet to qualify for it. So you actually don't even have to get to Masters technically to qualify for Worlds. Granted, you're going to be, it's going to be a lot harder to do that, and it's a lot riskier, a lot more feast or famine. But if you really, really can't play ladder and you just somehow hate it, and tournament play is everything to you, and you just want to do that and only that, it is possible to get there with just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last chance gauntlet is a tournament format, are obviously right. That's going to reward that. And, really, at the end of the day, I think that just any variety goes a long way towards dealing with burnout because it's not just the same thing over and over and over, right? And that variety matters so much when you're talking about burnout. And I really encourage everybody out there listening because it really worked for me. Go out there and, if you're right now, you're kind of in a slump with LOR, you just aren't really playing it that much, whatever it is, the fire is just kind of flickering. Make yourself sign up for a tournament. Not make yourself, but if you have any desire to, I highly encourage you to sign up for a tournament. There's a lot of good tournaments going on. You can find them pretty much everywhere. People talk about them in our Discord all the time. The community tournaments, I've been playing a lot of them whenever I have the chance. And I love them, honestly. I think the tournament format is significantly more fun than ladder, to be brutally honest. But having that goal of doing well in the tournaments also makes my laddering more fun. So I really can't recommend it enough, honestly. I really, really think that people should be playing more tournaments.
Yeah, and also if you don't even want to, if you don't think you're good enough or you don't feel confident enough to go to a tournament or you don't have the time to commit to something on the weekend like that, remember that you don't have to just try for your prime glory on the last chance on the gauntlets. You can keep playing the gauntlet continually, and it keeps being the tournament format, and it is a great way to practice the format, and it's a great way to practice lineups you're not sure about. So if you're I would love to try this set of decks, but I need to make sure I get my prime glory, well, play the one you think is good. You'll get it or you won't. And then try new things. You have infinite replays of that gauntlet over the weekend. And every playthrough is just a mini tournament for you. And use that to your advantage. It's a wonderful resource. And it's really like 85% of how I play the game at this point personally.
Yeah, they're fun, right? Like tournaments are fun. They're super fun. I love the format. Yeah. So I think that there's that, right. The fact that the format is the same is really kind of grinding on people. The other thing that I really want to talk about, and I think that there's a lot that goes into this half of it, is really the mentality behind laddering as well. Is can really get to some people if you aren't looking at it with a healthy mindset. So for a lot of people, one of the biggest gripes they have with like ladder formats or that type of thing is you sit down and you play for a session. Let's say you play for 2 hours, and in those 2 hours you go like 7-7, and you are at the exact same LP that you started at. You're still in platinum 2 or diamond 2, wherever it may be. It doesn't really matter. A lot of people are just like, and honestly, the initial reaction that I think the innate human reaction is, oh my God, I just spent 2 hours and I am in the exact same spot as I was when I started playing. I just wasted 2 hours. And it's like, and it is easy to see like how you draw that conclusion. Like, yeah, your ladder points didn't change. And that's why I think that in order to have I'm trying to state, in order to have like a longer career, in order to establish that longevity in these type of games, I really think you need to have a different mindset towards laddering. You need to be prioritizing learning and getting better as opposed to prioritizing your ladder points. And that's hard to do, especially when you're kind of burnt out, because that means you want to play less, which means that you just want to win more so that you have to play less, right? And that is like a self-destructive loop, I think, really, is like a big problem that a lot of people get sucked into, is if you are solely playing with the purpose of going from lower LP to higher LP, you are going to get frustrated when that doesn't happen. And at the end of the day, no matter how good you are, you're going to have a lot of sessions like that. Like it's just kind of the way of card games. Sometimes you're going to go down a lot of LP. Those are incredibly tilting for a lot of people. And it really is a mindset test. And it was easier. Oh, excuse me. It was easier to not to have that mindset when the game was newer, I think. And especially when you're a newer player, because, right? Like I've been Masters every season, top 700 every season, right? It's easy to fall into the trap that you don't really need to be learning as much anymore because it feels like you've already learned a lot, right? You know how the game works. And I think that that's probably most of our audience at this point, right? Everybody was new at one point. It's easy to focus on learning the game. The first time you get blown out by Make It Rain, whatever, you've never seen the card before. You get blown out by Make It Rain. It's easy to be like, oh, well, I lost that game because Make It Rain didn't exist. Next time I'll know it existed, I'll play around it, right? Or Decimate. I got decimated. Didn't know I needed to be at 5 instead of 4, right? Like, there's a million things that you can learn, and it's easy to focus on learning when you're new. It's much harder to focus on learning when you're 5 weeks into a season. You know what all the decks are doing. You've been playing the game for a year, right? It's really easy to lose track of the goal, in my mind, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I played some games before we recorded today, and the game I just finished like 15 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago, I literally learned something from that game. Basically, what happened was I was playing Pirates, as I do.
As you do.
And,
Let's go.
Yeah. And at one point, I think it was turn 3, I looked down at my hand and I had Decimate, Double Up, and Noxian Fervor. I was like, I'm going to crush this guy because he was already at 8.
He's dead.
Yep. And then I had exactly 3 mana at the end of turn 4, actually it was. I had the attack token, and my opponent had a much better board than me, but I was like, it's okay. They're going to be dead on the next turn. And then I was like, oh, I have this Legion Rearguard in my hand. And I didn't really think about it. I didn't take time to stop and wait and think should I play this? I just looked at the 1-drop and I was like, well, I'll play it because, it's a 1-drop and I have the mana for it. And I'm an aggressive deck, so I want to attack him more. If I had taken the time to stop and think about what my win condition was, and I was playing against Lulu Poppy. The way I'm winning this game is by racing and burning him out before he can swing with a huge board.
Yeah, they don't have healing, so you're pretty sure that Decimate's going to win the game.
Exactly. And I was at 3 mana after I had cast my Decimate, putting him to 4. So my next turn, like literally my next priority was casting my other Decimate, or if I can't do that, casting the double up in my hand to kill him. And I had 3 mana available to bank as spell mana. And all I needed to do was pass, and I needed to not play this Legion Rearguard because Legion Rearguard doesn't block. All I needed to do was think about that, because at the end of the day, Legion Rearguard was never going to get me in for more damage. It was never going to kill one of his creatures because he had a Laurent protege. It was never going to do anything except waste 1 mana. And it turned out that exact 1 mana killed me, because what I needed to do was he swung on the next, he open attacked me on the next turn for lethal. And all I needed to do was double up his 2/2 Laurent protege. And I was like, I hope he doesn't have Sharp Sight, because now I only have 2 mana left to Noxian Fervor this behind it. I could have done it if I hadn't played the Rearguard, and he would be dead no matter what. But now, if he has Sharp Sight or Ranger's Resolve, now I lose. And he had the Sharp Sight, and I lost. And if I had just stopped for a moment, didn't go on autopilot, and took the time to actually think about what playing this card meant for my game and if it was good or not, I would have won the game. And that's just... And yes, technically, I know the lesson of slow down and think about everything you do, but it's really easy always to just sort of play things out, especially when I'm playing Pirates, which is a deck I've played. I don't even want to think about
games.
Yeah, just actually countless games. I can't even think about how
playing that deck since beta.
I've been playing
since Bilgewater came out. You've been playing Pirates.
Exactly. And it's one of my favorite decks, if not my favorite. And it's easy to just be like, I'm good at this deck. I can do whatever I want. All my plays are the right ones. And that's just never true. No matter how many games you play, not all your plays would be the right ones. Because if they were, you'd be the best player in the world.
Yeah. And that it's so hard to lose a game and try and look at it with the positive mindset of today I learned something. I am going to be a better Legends of Runeterra player in the future. I am glad I lost that game. Obviously, you'd rather win every game, It's even harder, I think, to win a game and to try and take things away from it. Let's just rehash Hugh's story. Let's say he didn't have the Sharp Sight, right? Hugh still wins the game. It's still easy in that moment to be like, crap, should have not played the Legion Rearguard and would have had an extra mana. But you don't really harp on it as much. If you'd won that game, would you be telling this story, right? It wouldn't have stuck out in your mind as much probably. And maybe you still would have, of course, but you kind of see what I'm saying. It's so easy to lose focus of the end goal. The end goal, when you are trying to, make a name for yourself in a community, put up good results, be a good player, is always to get better. Okay, and you have to have faith in the system. And the system is, if you are a good player, you will win more games. And if you are a great player, you will win even more games. The better a player you are, the more games you will win, to a nearly infinite scale, right? You can get almost infinitely better at pretty much any card game. There's so many decisions, and it's impossible to pick the right one every time, right? In any given game, every player will make many mistakes, right? And it's very difficult to go through and analyze, which ones were correct plays, which ones weren't correct, especially because not all the correct plays work out and end up being good. Not all the incorrect plays end up being bad, right? So it's hard to parse all that information. But the end goal should always be improvement, I think. And we've talked about this in the past, but it's really important to kind of remind yourself that, especially when you've been playing for a year. Take a step back. A lot of people have like pretty big egos at this point in the community, right? You've been playing the game for a long time, and having an ego, thinking you're good at the game is not a bad thing. If you're good at the game, you should think you're good at the game. You are good at the game. You put a lot of time into it. You're a good player. You make a lot of correct plays. But that doesn't mean you're done, right? Like the hard work isn't done once you're good. Once you make the top page of Masters, it doesn't mean you're one of the 8 best players in the region. That doesn't mean your work is done, right? Once you have 1,500 LP in Masters, rank 1 on the ladder, that doesn't mean your work is done. You still should keep working because there's a million people, almost literally, at your heels, trying to take that place. So as long as you're constantly focusing on improving, I think that the ladder mindset almost kind of goes out the window a little bit, where when you have those 2-hour sessions where you don't get anywhere. You win 7 games, you lose 7 games. You're still at the same spot you started. You aren't going to have the mindset looking back on it of, I just wasted 2 hours. You're going to be able to think, I, in the future, am going to mini-morph Nami on site. I need to keep up 6 mana at all times. I, in the future, am going to... anything. There's infinite things I could say here, right? I'm going to save my rallies for when they don't have deny mana. I'm going to save my sharp sights to deal with double up, etc., right? You can learn so many things in every session of Legends of Runeterra, and it's on you to make sure you learn them, and you aren't just playing mindlessly and not learning anything and getting frustrated, especially getting frustrated. That one is a real no-no. You really want to try to avoid that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sometimes incredibly difficult, and it varies from person to person. Some people, the moment they see a certain card or a certain deck, they flip their keyboard over just in rage before the game has started. They don't even see their opening
caps
hand.
lock on Reddit.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're that kind of person, or you're close to that kind of person, you have a long way to go as far as
those people have the most to work on.
Exactly.
Which is the most frustrating part, because they're also the least likely to work on it.
Yes. So one thing that's incredibly important is obviously self-reflection. But another thing, so we keep saying try your best to learn, try your best to slow down, try your best to come away from an experience, all of the games, with just a positive outlook and see what you gained, even though you didn't gain LP. And I think that a good way to do this, because we haven't actually told you guys how to do it, we just have told you guys to do it.
Much easier said than done.
Exactly. And my personal recommendation is, actually, this is a feature I'd love to see implemented in the game in general. I would love it if you could hide your own LP always. I would love it if you could click a button that said, I can't see my rank, I can't see my LP. All I see is, I don't see anything. The same, when you click normal instead of ranked, I want it to be the same. Because a lot of people play ladder to gain LP, not to get better. They just look at the number they have on their screen, and a lot of people would say, probably, I would rather just, if you walked up to someone and said, what if I just gave you 400 LP right now? Would you take it and instead just not play today at all? And most people would probably say yes. Shit, I might even say yes. And
deal. I mean, I'd snap it off. 400's a lot of LP, but right. Regardless,
Exactly. But if you had that happen, and let's section out a little more. Let's say that every day you gain 80 LP whether you play the game or not. Eventually, you're not going to play the game, and you're not going to ever get better. If all you're in it for is the LP, then you're never ever going to be a great player. Period.
You're going to get smoked. Yeah.
Yeah. You're never going to learn. You're never going to improve, because, and obviously this can never happen. But my point is, focus less on the rank and the number of LP you have. Just focus on game by game, win the game you're in, and then go to the next game, and just focus on just that game, and focus on getting better and playing better. And your LP number will go up. It'll happen. because you'll improve. And when you improve, you beat people who are worse than you. And sometimes you lose to people who are still worse than you. That's going to happen all the time. But if you focus all your effort on improvement and you focus not at all on what that number on your screen says, I guarantee you're going to climb a lot faster.
Yeah, and the hardest part is that a lot of people associate, like, let's take an example here to help prove my point. So last season for me, I felt like I put a lot of time into playing tournaments, and I played the seasonal, and I felt the most prepared I'd ever been for a seasonal tournament. I felt, and I kind of got smoked. I had my worst seasonal performance ever, and that was really disappointing. When I take a step back and think about, I think it was 2 seasons before that, maybe just a season before that, I went 6-2. I think one win off of qualifying for the top.
There's
top
9
round.
rounds,
Maybe
so it would have been
wins.
6-3 or 7-2.
Yeah, 6-3, I think. Which was a pretty good performance. But like when I think about those things, I think that I was a much better player in my second round. And it's easy to think that, I was better the first time because, I had a better result. Or, in a slightly easier to comprehend, let's say someone's diamond this season and, was Masters last season. It's easy to think that I was a better player last season. I made Masters. I made a higher rank. Like I was a better player. And those things just aren't always true. Right. And that's why it's so important to focus on improvement, because that is the thing you can control in these card games that have innate variance. Right. You can't control what your rank is at all times. You can put in more hours, which, should make your rank go up because you're playing more, you're learning. There are things you can absolutely do to make your rank be higher, but they aren't always just, I have more LP this season, so I'm better. And it's a really easy trap to fall into, and it's especially difficult to dig yourself out of a hole when, like, say, for example, last season I made Masters, and this season I'm just like really hard stuck diamond and I can't get out. And then it becomes really frustrating because it's really easy to say to yourself, like, what the heck? Like, I'm a Masters player. Clearly I made Masters last season. Like, why am I hard stuck in diamond this season, 400 games or whatever? And it's like, when you think about it, really, it's like, well, what happened last season? Oh, I just, I hit D2 and then went on a 11 game win streak to Masters or something. It's like, okay, like that can't happen every time, right? Like, it's easy for people to focus on the highest point of the bell curve outliers and forget about kind of where the average is. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be proud of yourself from reaching new highs. You absolutely should. And in general, higher points of LP do mean that you are performing better. But it really is as much of a negative trap as much as it is a positive trap, is kind of what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, just in general, I think a good way to sort of put this in fewer words is stop looking at your skill and improvement based on results. Stop the results-based, thinking. Basically, so focus on what you're doing, not how you're doing. That's a little, little vague, but you kind of see what I'm getting at. And also, this is more applicable to people who are trying to be great and be the best and make worlds. And there's a lot of people, actually almost everyone, most people who play this game are not trying to do that. And those people also struggle with ladder burnout. And the advice I have for those people is a little bit different, because at the end of the day, you're not looking to sit atop you're not looking to win worlds, and you just want to hit diamond, and you're really struggling to do that, and you're hard stuck gold 2 or something like that, and you're just like so sick of playing. And that's a very, very different position than what we just talked about, which is someone who is trying to be the best.
And equally difficult and equally valid. Like, everybody is at a different point on the climb. And I'm really glad you brought this up, Hugh, because it is really important to focus on, this side of the game. So please take it away.
Yes, yeah. Basically, this is just when people talk about this subject, they kind of get carried away and talk about only what the top 2% of all
Guilty.
players. Yeah, I
Guilty.
mean, that's exactly every moment up until this point in this episode is what we've been doing. So
you can tell where my mind is at, right? So
right. So if you're someone who is just not at all concerned with being the best player ever, and not at all concerned with getting to Worlds, and not even concerned with qualifying for a seasonal tournament, and you just are like, I really want to hit Diamond because I really want those prismatic capsules at the end of the season, or I just want to be in Diamond. There's whatever.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter what the reason is. You want to get to a point. That's your goal, and you want to achieve that goal. And for people like that who are just sort of playing the game because they like it, when you're getting burned out on the ladder, try and return to the things that made you love the game in the first place. Like when you're getting frustrated and we're getting mad, whether it's because you hate a certain card, you hate a certain deck, you're just tired, whatever, you're on a big losing streak and you're hitting a learning curve wall or something like that. Just try and return to the thing, like think back to your first moment in the game that you played that you got excited about. Like what was the thing that made you happy to do when you played the game back when you first started? Or it doesn't even have to be when you first started. It could be a particular moment that has always stuck with you in the time that you've played. Like just try and look back at your highest highs when you've been playing and just try and return to those moments. Like maybe it was with a deck that's bad now. Maybe it was with a card that's been nerfed a bunch of times and is bad now. If it was something that you loved to do and you're like kind of getting sick of what you're currently doing in this game and that's keeping you from playing it, just go back to what you loved doing. Like, because especially for the people who aren't trying to be the best, you're playing to have fun more than any of us. That's your goal more than anything. Like, because something that's hard to juggle for a high level competitive player is like the balance between fun and obligation. Like we have this podcast, so at a certain point, we can't just decide to stop playing completely. We do have to play at least a little bit. And that little bit of obligation does tend to, at least for me, sour some of the game a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It can feel a little bit like a job at certain points, right? Like, whether, it's showing up to record, and this is going to be the same for people who are streaming and for people who are trying to compete, right? Like, or anybody at a high level, like it can feel like a bit of a chore at certain points, and it's difficult to balance that.
Right. And we've given a lot of advice to those people. And for everyone else who just wants to have fun, but you also do want to improve and you also do want to hit a certain point on the ladder, and maybe that certain point is eventually Masters. Maybe you do really want to get to that level. It's a lot easier to get to a higher point in the game when you're just enjoying what you're doing. When you're having fun, you're not really going to get tilted. Like sometimes you will, but it's so much harder, especially if you're having fun with people. And this is advice we always give. We've given this advice a bunch of times, and I'm just going to say it again. Play with your friends.
It's as good as gold.
Yeah,
it's as good as gold.
And it's the most effective advice I've ever. I think this is the best advice for dealing with tilt, at least for me. Like when you're playing with your friends, or you're even when I was streaming and there was someone talking to me in the chat, I could play all day. If someone's talking to me in Twitch chat and interacting with me, I can ladder for 10 straight hours. I don't care. When I'm playing by myself, I play like 5 games, and then the 6th one I'll lose, and I'll be like, I'm done for the day. It's completely different. And everyone's different, obviously, but that's a big one for me.
It really is. And man, there's just so many ways to have fun with the game, right? Like at the end of the day, if you are not having fun with the game in whatever way you're approaching it from, then it really would behoove you to take a step back and and think about, just like you said, like, what are the things that I really do enjoy about the game? What are the pieces that of this puzzle that are kind of missing? For me, like, I had this problem when I first transitioned from an expedition, from like, I played entirely expeditions when I started playing the game. And then I started trying to, play competitively, started playing ranked, started playing ladder. And I had a few of these moments where I was like, man, I just don't like it as much as expedition. Like, I just kind of, and so I would like, basically, like, that's the piece of advice here is like, yeah, if there's something else you want to do, do it. Like, if you aren't having fun doing whatever it is, come back to it later. Legends of Runeterra is not going anywhere. If you really don't want to click play again, it's okay. Take a break, get up, get some water, go hang out with your friends, go watch a movie with your mom. Whatever it is you want to be doing, go ahead and do it, right? Like, it's not like you have to force yourself to be doing only ranked ladder with only Nami Zoe because it's the best deck and you hate it, but it's the best deck and the only thing that matters is like climbing up, right? Like, just don't do that to yourself. That's really the, like, a big thing for like dealing with burnout is like, listen to yourself, right? Like, when you're, let's take it to a slightly different example. If you're going on a run or whatever, a lot of the time, eventually, you're gonna need to stop running, when your body is telling you like, okay, like, I am so tired, I need a break, we need to stop and get water, right? Like, a lot of the best runners in the world can continue going, but that's because they're the best runners in the world, right? When you think about these card games, a lot of the best players in the world have built up that endurance. They can play for 11 hours a day and they can be learning things the whole time. And you can't just do that off the bat. Whatever it is your body is telling you, like, I'm so tired of playing Legends of Runeterra, you're getting tilted every game, you're just not enjoying it. Take a step back and listen to what your mind is telling you, right? Because, like, it's easy to just try and think, well, like, oh, well, other people can do it, so like I can power through the pain. I'm not, I am not a marathon runner. I could probably be hard pressed to run like 2 miles at this point, right? I'm a card game player, like, I couldn't do that. And it's ridiculous to think, a lot of people, they just, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, listen to your body. You don't have to push through the burnout like face on. You don't just have to hit it like a brick wall and try and keep going. There are ways around it. It's, the only way is not always through. It's a lot about working smarter, not harder, is, I guess, kind of what I'm trying to get at here. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to go play some expeditions. It's okay to not play the game for a week and come back to it refreshed, right? Like, those type of things help so much some of the time. And like, I have a competitive podcast where we try and talk about, competitive side of the game a lot. And a couple times during the Azir Irelia season, I just didn't want to play at all. Like, every time I would log on, and I didn't even hate the meta that much, really, but it was mostly just I'd been playing a lot for a long time, and I kind of needed a break, Oh, and I got really into, like, a couple other games, right? It's okay. Like, there would be a week where I just wouldn't play, and it's okay, like, you can do the other things you want to do, you can take your time doing these things. If you're enjoying playing Legends of Runeterra, it's always going to be more productive, more enjoyable. You're going to have more fun, obviously, while you're enjoying it. So, make sure you're enjoying it, basically.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the thing about listen to your body.
Yeah.
Because a good way to tell if you should stop is if you're about to sit down at your computer and you look at the Legends of Runeterra icon, you're about to click on it. And in that little moment, there's always a moment when you're about to do anything, whether it's boot up a game, go somewhere, spend some time with someone. There's always a moment where you get a little bit of a feeling, like your gut reacts, and it's going to be either positive or it's going to be negative. If your gut says, if you're kind of dreading what you're about to do, you'll feel it. You'll notice. And if you're dreading what you're about to do, this isn't one of those things that you have to do. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to a doctor's appointment. This is just a game. You're allowed, and this is going to sound crazy as people with a podcast dedicated to this game. You can quit. You can stop completely. And like you said, The game isn't going anywhere. You can stop for months and you can just come back later. And this is more directed at the more casual players, but this is even true for people who want to be the best. If you want to be the best, you can quit for a month and come back later. Like, the game is going to keep existing. You can plan to be the best player in the world in, like, you know, a year. You can stop for 2 months, come back and, you know, play like crazy and practice and do the whole thing. And you can still take breaks. Definitely take shorter breaks if you're trying to be the best player ever. But if you're not, and you just, like, you want to get to platinum or you want to get to diamond, but you're just really not feeling the game right now, just stop playing it. Do something else. Enjoy your life. And if this isn't a part of your life that you're currently enjoying, just stop putting yourself through it. You can do that. That's allowed.
Absolutely. And, you know, hopefully that's not where people are at. You know, you could still listen to your favorite Legends of Runeterra podcast while you aren't playing the game, for example. No, but, like, yeah, exactly. Like, there is just nothing wrong with not playing for a little bit. You know, you can take a week break. You could take a 2-week break. If after 2 weeks you come back and you're like, man, I still just have no desire to play. Like, it'll either return naturally or it won't. And for most people that like these type of games, like, you're gonna get sucked back in, you know. Like, most people are not gonna, you know, you're gonna open Twitter, you're gonna see the new champion get spoiled, and you're gonna be like, holy shit, dude, they put Yorick into Legends of Runeterra. This card looks sick. I'm about to play some of that, right? Like, and that, like, excitement that you have towards the game goes so far towards dealing with burnout or dealing with, like, you're just going to be excited to play the game. You know, when you've done something, you know, we've been playing this game for over a year now, right? You lose that, like, you know, butterflies in your stomach, that mystic feeling, right? You know, the Christmas Eve type of, you know, childhood giddiness, right? Like, you just are going to lose that. It's going to become jaded after a while. It always happens. It happens with everything you'll ever do. It's okay to try and take a little bit of a break to kind of get some of that back. You don't have to force yourself to go through it, basically.
And also, if after that 2-week break you're still not feeling it, take another 2 weeks, maybe another 2 months. If you're not feeling it still, and this isn't a positive part of your life, just stop completely. Like, if this isn't something you like, just don't do it. There's no. And I get if you want to make gaming your career and your living, but, you know.
Yeah, but at that point it becomes your job. So, like, you know, nobody wants to go to work. So, if, you know.
Yeah,
like,
and nobody wants to go to work, especially if they also hate their job. This isn't a job that is going to pay you millions of dollars. This is not a high-paying gig. Playing games professionally, it's unless you're at the absolute tip top, and even then it's not amazing. You have to be like a content creator to really make money at that point. And, like,
yeah,
if you're not, like, fully in, you're not all the way into this, and this isn't what you absolutely love, like, you can stop.
Yeah, and it's really hard to, you know, be the best, and it takes a lot of commitment, and you have to go through a lot of hurdle. Like, if you are seriously considering trying to, you know, devote real time into being the best, like, there are a lot of mental hurdles you need to go over. The path is not easy. There are hundreds of other people that are trying to crawl to the top, you know, caterpillar tower style. Man, that's hard to say. Right? It is a really hard road, and you have to pass over a lot of bumps in order to try and get there, to get to the smooth sailing point. And you can't expect it to be easy and all those things. And burnout is a very real part, is probably the biggest hurdle for most people when they're trying to become one of the best. At the end of the day, there is almost no substitute for hours put into something to make you better at it, in my opinion. When I think about the best player or the best person in the world at anything has almost across the board usually put the most time into that thing. people talk about like 10,000 hours being the like point of mastery for something. When you think about 10,000 hours, how many hours has Magnus Carlsen put into chess, right? I bet it's way more than 10,000 hours, right? Like you can't expect to beat Magnus Carlsen at chess unless you've put thousands of hours into that thing, right? And it's very, very, at some point, it's ridiculous to think that Magnus Carlsen never got burned out at chess, for example, right? You know, every competitor deals with burnout. How you deal with it is different for everyone and very important. And I don't know, I said to listen to your body earlier. Listen to your body doesn't always mean that you need to take a 2-week break, right? If you're feeling burned out. Listen to your body can mean I just played 3 games like garbage. I'm tilted. I'm going to take an hour break, right? Like that's a very reasonable thing, right? It doesn't have to be so extreme all the time. Or you just see that expedition button just flashing right below play. You're like, oh, that looks fun. I'm going to do that. Then do it, It doesn't have to be an extreme thing, but you should, people deal with burnout in different ways, is essentially. If you know what works for you, then you should do that. If you don't know what works for you, then your body will tell you. You just have to pay attention.
Yeah, and like you said, it's different for everyone. I think the most general advice that can be given is find a way to have fun. Stop paying too much attention to your LP and the results of your games. Pay attention to the games themselves. Focus on learning, and that's, very basic concepts, but it'll look a little bit
having fun.
Yeah, it'll look a little bit different for everyone. You'll do it different ways. It could be expeditions, could be labs, it could be going outside and taking a walk. Just find a way to enjoy the game and find a way to learn things, and that'll just help always.
Yeah. A mentality shift goes a long way. Looking at things from a different perspective goes a long way. Yeah, and really the if you want my real quick most work for me, Hugh mentioned it earlier, playing with friends, playing with people, one of the best possible ways to avoid tilts and to add fun, and it adds new perspectives into the game. It gives people, you can talk about plays. Honestly, I think playing with friends is actually goated. On top of that, you can try and play a different deck, or just play a more fun deck. A lot of people enjoy streaming. Sometimes you can stream the game, and that's a lot of fun for a lot of people. There's play expeditions, play labs. These are some of the really easy ways, quote unquote, to deal with burnout. And if none of those things are working at the end of the day, then maybe you should start to look towards, maybe I'm just going to take a quick break, not play for a couple days, and come back to it.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to play again, you can play again, and if you don't have to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a job for. I mean, it's basically a job for probably like 10 or less people in the community, right? You really don't have to put your everything into it if you aren't trying to. If you are trying to put your everything into it, then hell yeah, double down. You get out the notepad, take notes during games. That's sick. That's another way that, at least for me personally, I loved, one of the ways that I revitalized myself was I'm not taking the game seriously enough. So I'd get out a notepad and try and write bullet points. So things that when I did that, I noticed that for those couple weeks that I was doing that, one, I improved a lot. It was a great way to do it. I should really go back and do it some more, because I kind of stopped doing it, probably just because I'm kind of lazy. But it was a really great thing to do. I highly recommend it. I should do it more. Regardless, at the end of those sessions, I just I almost had no idea where my LP was. I would look and be like, huh, really? I gained 100 LP today. That's cool. Or, oh man, really? I lost 20 LP today? Crap. But I wouldn't really notice till the end of it, and then I'd have this huge checklist of a bunch of things I'd learned to be like, this is sick. Look all these things. It's easy to try to find your fun in different ways. Basically, the fun does not always have to come from the victory screen.
Yep, exactly. And I don't know about you, but I think that's about everything I have for this topic.
Yeah, I think we kind of talked a lot about it, but that was fun. I like this topic a lot. It's a good one.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always relevant.
Yeah, I feel like I could talk about this for hours, to be honest. But without further ado, we should probably get into the rest of our questions we have. Our first question, well, I guess our second question. Thank you, Leovold, for your wonderful question of the week. Our second question comes from Keon Spy. They ask, do you think Worlds will have a diverse meta or expect to see the same 3 decks? I guess I'll start here. I think it's going to be pretty diverse. I think that people are going to have very different strategies. I also think that we have very little idea about what a lot of the lesser known players are doing or bringing, especially from like some of the other regions. Like, as an Americas player, I just tend to have a little bit more, keep up with the Americas shard players, Majin Bay, that type of thing. A lot of them are content creators that speak our language. So it's easy to keep up with them. But I would expect that a lot of the different regions are going to bring some pretty spicy stuff. I think that everybody is probably going to have a different, or not everybody, but there's going to be a lot of different ban strategies, which is going to result in a lot of different lineups. I'm willing to say that I'm pretty confident it's going to be quite diverse.
I completely agree. And that's more because this meta is new. Like we keep forgetting just how new everything is. Yeah. And they didn't give us time really to solidify the meta as a whole. There just wasn't enough people couldn't play enough games to really figure out what the best deck is no matter what. Like there could be the best deck that hasn't been discovered yet. That's entirely possible. And I'm sure that people have been testing things in secret and are going to finally like bust out their super sweet new deck at Worlds, and people are going to be blown away by like, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah, I want to see something new so bad.
Yeah, like, man, this Anivia Swain deck looks baller.
Oh yeah.
Like,
don't stop.
Exactly. Like there's so many cards in this game. There's so many champions now. There's so many possibilities, and it's really easy to get in a feedback loop of, oh, this deck's really good. And then like everyone picks it up and then it gets results. And then, everyone starts playing that deck and then starts iterating on that deck a little bit, but they don't like branch out and try something completely new because it's hard. It's scary. It's risky. You don't want to bring something it's hard to bring something that's completely new to the highest level tournament this game has seen, but I think people are going to do it. Because
I agree.
They like
go big or go home.
Exactly. And there are some people who are so good at deck building, and I don't get how they're so good at deck building. It's amazing.
It blows my mind how good people are at putting pieces of cardboard in a pile and having it work.
I know. And you're like, well, why and you look at some of these decks have like 7 cards that are 1-ofs and like 4 cards that are 2-ofs, and you're like, why? Like, how did you get there? Doesn't make sense to me.
And they've got like a spreadsheet, right? They're like, well, I need these 2 cards for the discard matchup. I need this card to deal with darkness, and you're like, oh my God, they actually thought about it all. This is ridiculous. Like these people just like, these are the people that I imagine like Queen's Gambit style, like sitting looking up at the ceiling with like the team, like the 1-of Teemo, like sliding down and going into your Bandle Tree deck. Like,
yeah, exactly. And for this reason, these people existing and being this good at this, I think Worlds will have a diverse meta, because you can't just jam the 3 like quote unquote best decks in a lineup and expect to win. I think that in order to like really sit at the top of Worlds, you're going to have to think outside the box a little bit. And it could just be,
for sure.
It could just be one deck that's like off the wall and crazy. Because remember, the third deck is always the hardest and the most important, because 2 good decks is easy, but the third one, it's difficult, man.
Real hard, yeah. And I do think that this episode is probably going to go up after Worlds working. We've had a little bit of wonky recording, unfortunately, due to me moving, Noble being out. So people will probably know whether or not the world's meta was diverse, but I'm curious to see whether or not we are right.
Same.
All right, our next question comes from Merciless Carinal. They ask, what do you think about calling a region well represented if they are low-key carried by one champ? Draven, Zoe, Lee, etc. How can we tell if a region is legit good or if one thing is dragging the power level in a certain direction? This is a good question. So my initial instinct here is there's definitely a bit of a difference between. So basically, I guess I'm just going to use the cards that were given in the example. So when I think of Draven, Draven is clearly an incredible card. He is, like, without a doubt, one of the best cards in the game, period, bar none. And he is absolutely a staple part of Noxus and a good reason to be in Noxus. However, I think that Draven is not really like supporting Noxus on his shoulders alone. Whereas when I think about like Lee Sin, I think that like maybe that one was like actually a pretty good example of like Ionia getting carried by one card. And really, like, when I think about it, it's just like, is the surrounding package around these cards good? Basically, like, you know, are the Noxus cards around Draven good? Like, can you win games when you don't draw Draven? And the answer is absolutely yes. Like, I think that the Noxus cards are just really good. And if they didn't have Draven, or if Draven got nerfed, like, we'd still be playing House Spider, we'd still be playing Tribeam and Probulator, right? Like, we'd still be playing some form of Noxus mid-range deck. Like, Draven is not the quintessential Noxus mid-range card. He is the best card in the deck, but it's not like the deck would completely cease to function without him. And maybe it would, just because the power level would go down so much. But my instinct is that the rest of the cards there are, like, good enough to do it. Lee is like a little odd because you can't win games with the Lee deck without drawing Lee, but that's how the decks were built, so like maybe that's not super fair. Regardless, like, there were a lot of points in time where you basically are just seeing only one champion from a certain region, and you're kind of just, I don't know. This is really hard question. It's kind of how I feel. My instinct is Noxus is not carried by Draven in particular. I think that there have been some regions that have been carried by specific champions in the past and present. I don't think that Zoe is solo carrying Targon right now, but I don't know. I mean, I guess the only, like, it's hard to tell because there's oftentimes just a best champion in a region or like a best card for an archetype. And you're just going to see only that champion because it's the best fit for most shells, but you'd still want the shell. Like, does that kind of make sense, what I'm saying here, Hugh?
I think I see where you're going. I think I'll pick it up. The way I think about this is less. So first of all, remember that this is a champion focused game. The focal point of every deck is meant to be the champions. So if a region is centered around one or two champions and people are saying it's a good region for that reason, they're not inherently wrong, because the whole point of the game is to be focused on the champions. However, I do think that if the only good card in a region is a champion, then that doesn't make the region good. I think a lot of what makes a region good is not necessarily. So first of all, I think that power level doesn't entirely dictate it. I don't think that just because a region is seeing very little play I don't think that means a region is bad. It might be, not very prevalent in the meta, but I don't think that makes that a bad region. I think regions are meant to encapsulate more of an identity within the game and play a role within the game. Like, for example, Noxus is seen as a very aggressive region. It's very good at being the aggro region. It's very good at dealing damage, has big creatures, has a lot of small aggressive creatures, has a very strong identity, and I think and it has really good champions like Draven. I think for this reason, Noxus is one of the best regions, if I arguably the best region, in general, and not just in the current meta right now. Right. And let's think about like Freljord. Freljord's not doing much right now. But Freljord does have a pretty strong identity. It is a very much a control region. It has ramp, it has healing, it has very known champions, very key champions to its playstyle. I don't think that Freljord not being prevalent in the meta makes it a bad region. And if the question is specifically asking about power level, then I do think that you do need more than just a champion to be good for a region to be good. I think you want to look at, like you said, the packages. Freljord has a good control package, and as long as it has that package, as long as you're excited to put cards in your deck from Freljord that isn't literally just, say, a Nivea or Ashe, then I think a region is pretty good. Obviously, this varies from region to region. Like, Noxus has tons of cards that lots of different decks want for lots of different reasons. And that's just going to be less true of others. Like, not every region can have the same representation all the time. That's just how games work. Like, there are bad cards, there are good cards. And some regions will have more good cards than other regions. That's just always going to be true. And I don't necessarily think that makes any region bad. But that being said, I do think Targon is pretty bad right now.
Yeah, that's fair. I think you summed that up quite well. I love the point that you made about champions, that like, actually, like, yeah, this is a champion centered game, so it's okay for the champions to be this shining spotlight of any given region. That's a good point. I never thought about it that way. All right, our next question comes from Dragon. He asks, if you wanted to buff an archetype on Runeterra, which archetype would it be, and how would you go about doing it? You want to take this one first, Hugh?
Okay, so y'all are gonna absolutely hate me for this, but I love the prison archetype, and Tom Rocca, if it was like a little bit better and a little like more fun to play. Yeah. Oh my god, everything about the game plan of Tom Rocca is everything I love to do to my opponents always. Like, I don't know why I enjoy.
Just want to eat them up.
I just want to see, like, it was different back when I played Magic because you'd actually be sitting across from the person. But like, one of my favorite things was to just like see the slow descent into just despair and futility. And they're just like,
goes from a smile at the start of the round to a frown as they look down and you miracle another terminus.
Yeah, or just like, exactly. Like, I love just like seeing my opponent slowly lose hope. And this just like, yes, I'm the worst. And I get that.
I love it.
But that has always been kind of my favorite thing to do in any game. Like, I played blue-white hard control in Magic, and I played like Control Paladin in Hearthstone that had like no win con for a while. But yeah, that's kind of my favorite thing, and it shouldn't get too good. They shouldn't buff it that much, and they shouldn't add that much of it to the game, because it is bad for the game if the best thing to do is a prison deck. If that's the best thing, the game is suffering, and I don't want the game to suffer, but I do want to play Tom Rocca style decks a little bit more.
All right, my answer is I guess kind of in a similar vein, and that's spell-based control, basically. So I'm thinking like as Karma, that type of thing. It was pretty good for the entirety of last season, I think, and I actually think it's still not so bad right now. But I would like to look at the like Shadow Isles based control decks, because I think like Ruination, Vengeance, those cards are all like really cool. They're just, I don't know, maybe some people won't think they're cool. I think they're cool. I like being able to like look down at my hand and like craft a plan for And I think they're in like not a great spot right now. They're a little slow. Um, they cost a little too much mana, I think. So I think my answer is that I'd like to see a little bit of love towards the like big Shadow Isles cards, because it's felt like a while since we've seen the big Shadow Isles cards, and even when we have, it's usually been in like a Freljord package, so that we could have like Avalanche, so that we could have like the actually good control package, and like, you know, Ruination or whatever got cut from Field of Rush like pretty early on in its lifespan. So I feel like that archetype, while maybe it's kind of existed in one form or another, it hasn't quite been in the form I would like, if that makes sense. All right, our next question also comes from Dragon. They ask, "What do you think is the best champion in expeditions?" Do you want to go first, Hugh? Do you have an answer?
Ooh, the best champion in expedition.
I've got a
Yeah,
I've got a
you can go
real
ahead
shocker.
if you've got one.
I got a real hot take.
Oh, okay.
I think it's Lux.
Wow. I see it. I see your reasoning, I think. Go ahead with why.
On God, I think it's Lux, and here's why. I think that Demacia is just the best region in Expedition. So I'm going to start there. That's a big part of it, is that I think Demacia is the best region in Expedition. And that has a lot to do with the fact that Demacia's whole region identity is largely built on just good cards and some synergies, but it's not crazy synergy based. And a lot of the game, especially as it's gotten later into its lifespan, has become more and more synergy based. You know, when I think of certain other champions that come to mind, like Callista, Zoe, you know, Lee Sin, like really powerful champions like Nami, etc. Those really powerful constructed champions, they often have a really strong supporting package around them. With Demacia, you just get the biggest units per mana cost, which is until you start getting to like the really big stuff that Freljord has. But like for the most part, you're getting the biggest units, you're getting all the good dragons, you're getting all the good elites, right? And you can have various different synergy cards for those packages once you already have them. And there aren't a whole lot of duds. It also just has really good combat tricks. And the combat tricks are like, I think, king in Expedition. Combat tricks are like some of the best things you can be doing. On top of that, Lux just is an absurd board control monster. It is really easy to pay 6 mana for a spell, especially because Demacia has like those really good 6 mana spells. I'm thinking like Remembrance really stands out to me as like one of the best ones. And it's gotten a lot more. I mean, like now it has Sharp Sight. I mean, I don't need to tell you how good Sharp Sight is, right? So single combat, concerted strike, like there's just, you know, there's so many good Demacia units coupled with so many efficient Demacia spells that when you put that all together and then you take Lux, she's got barrier when she comes down, she's hard to deal with. She takes over the game because Final Spark is absurd in Expedition. Let's start there. Like it kills so many things and it's 0 mana and it's too slow and constructed. Let's be honest. It's just too slow and constructed, but it is not too slow in Expedition. I think it kind of does the Heimerdinger job, but better, because instead of playing spells and then getting units, you're playing units, which your units are just good because you're playing a Demacia deck. You're playing your spells that either make units, like Heimerdinger does already, or they kill your opponent's units, and then Lux gives you another thing to kill another unit. It is like almost impossible to try and fight the board control game against Demacia Lux. And I think that the board is the most important part of Expedition. And I think that Lux is the best champion because of that. And she's insanely easy to flip. That's my spiel.
Okay.
Hopefully I sold somebody. Somebody. If I got one person, that's all. That's all I wanted.
Very similar answer and rationale. Almost identical answer and rationale, actually, from me. Shyvana. So, like you said, I agree that Demacia is the best single region for Expedition for all of the reasons you stated. Combat tricks are amazing. Its removal is based on having creatures, and it has the most. generally just
It's not doing anything cute. It's just all good.
Yep, exactly. It's just good things to do. And that's what you want in Expedition. You don't want to accidentally have to take, some awful, awful synergy card that will never do anything in your deck. Demacia doesn't really have those.
The only one is Mobilize.
Right. And Mobilize, can be fine. It's not going to be good, but it can be fine. I've lost games to Mobilize because my opponent has had Mobilize on turn 3 and they hadn't played a creature yet, and the next 3 turns was them just flooding the board with overstated stuff.
And that's the absolute worst card in Demacia is Mobilize.
Yeah.
Sure, Mobilize is quite bad, but it doesn't get, it's half a Lux trigger.
Yeah, right, exactly. And the reason I say Shyvana instead of Lux is because she's also basically a 4/5, but she costs 4 mana. Yeah, she doesn't have barrier, but she's 2 mana less, and she flips pretty quickly, and she also makes removal spells that are good.
Yeah, she's really good.
They both fulfill a very weirdly similar role, and just both do it very effectively. Shyvana is faster, a little easier to kill, but not that much easier, because she kind of heals every time she attacks, and she flips so fast that it usually doesn't matter. And the combat tricks in Demacia are so good. I think it's Shyvana if I had to pick one.
That's a really good one. I really think Shyvana is way better. I'm gonna make one more counter argument here for my girl Lux, and that's that. I think the Mage Seeker cards are exceptional in Expedition, mostly because all of the expensive Demacia spells are quite good. I'm mostly thinking Remembrance, Judgment just wins pretty much every game it's cast for the most part. That card is completely unreal good in Expedition, and the more Mage Seeker type stuff that you have, the more likely you are to bomby cards like Judgment, for example. And after you've played a 6 mana spell, your already good Demacia units just get even better. Yes, please. And they all there's so many things that have Challenger, and Challenger's I think the best keyword in Expedition. I love Demacia.
Oh man, I'm so glad you brought up Lux's Mage Seeker package, because I think so we got Mobilize as the worst card. I think those are next in line for the worst cards in Expedition for Demacia.
Wow, really?
Yes, I do.
I think they're really good.
I think they're bad because a lot of them, it takes a little bit of time to get a good 6 mana spell cast, because one of the spells in Demacia is back-to-back, and that's not great. You need creatures for that. There's Remembrance, but you don't really want to pay 6 mana for Remembrance usually. It's fine too.
I do.
It's fine.
On turn 3? You kidding me?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
insane on turn 3.
It is. And that's fine, but just playing good creatures, just playing good creatures on curve in Demacia is so much better. And you're playing a bunch of
also good.
You're playing a bunch of below curve stuff. And if you're playing that below curve stuff, that the Mage Seeker stuff, you're not playing the spell that you need. And by the time you do play the spell that you need, you've lost a lot of momentum on the board. I think those Mage Seeker cards, at least a couple of them, are a trap. I do like having 1 or 2 of the 3 mana 3/3 that gives you a detain, but that's about it.
Yeah, there's also Vanguard Redeemer, which is is that the one I'm thinking of? The 3 mana 3/3 that makes a 4 Demacia in hand. That card is a house. I don't know, the one that gets Challenger. I'm spacing on a lot of these names because, let's be honest, they're kind of generic.
Yeah, they're very generic.
The one that gets Challenger, that one's pretty good. I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're the best units in Demacia or anything. I just think they play a little better than most people give them credit for, which I guess you disagree with, but that's all right.
Yeah.
That's probably why we ended up at the different champions that we did.
Yeah.
Alrighty, and our last question for the day comes from Snot and Faublas. They ask simply, "How's the climb going?" I guess I'll go ahead and hit it off. So I hit Masters pretty early in the season. Actually, I was pretty. I was in the middle of moving, but I had like a few weeks off before school started for me. So I just spent like 2.5 weeks basically at home with my parents. Had just quit my past job, so I didn't have a whole lot to do. So I played a lot of Legends of Runeterra. I hit Masters pretty quickly with very little resistance. I got stuck in Diamond for a little longer than I was hoping to, but when you're that early in the season, I mean, I noticed that when I was in like Diamond 3, I was just like 7 or 8 of games out of 10, I would queue into like a top Masters player that I like followed on Twitter, right? Like it was pretty much all heavy hitters, just because that early on in the season, like that's where all the heavy hitters are still, because it's so early in the season that people haven't quite yet made it to Masters. So I had a little bit of hiccup in Diamond, made it to Masters probably a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks into the season. Not lightning fast, but relatively quickly. I've been playing in Masters since then, and kind of getting for the most part, I spent like a solid while getting kind of smoked, to be honest. Like, I was just playing a lot of decks, didn't really find things that were clicking. I was playing against exclusively top tier players, which also obviously does not help, especially when you're in Masters. You have to win, roughly 60 something percent of your games in order to gain LP, which is very hard to do against exclusively the best players in your region. But I actually, and I'm glad that you asked this question in this episode, because I got kind of frustrated after like a week of playing a lot and still being at 0 LP in Masters. And then I thought to myself, you know what? This is ridiculous. I'm being ridiculous. I'm playing almost every game against some of the best players in the world. Many of them are streaming. And so I sat down and I was like, I'm going to learn like a lot in this time while the ranks are still, basically where while I'm at 0 LP, I'm queuing into heavy hitters over and over and over and over again, right? And, when you're in Masters anyway, you're going to be queuing against good players always, but there is a big difference between a good Masters player and some of the best players in the world, right? And so, for me, who I consider myself better than sort of the like lower tier Masters players, but certainly not one of the absolute best players in the world quite yet, I've thought it was a really great opportunity to try and learn a lot. And I sat and I had a very critical lens. I have no idea what my win rate was. And I think I learned a whole lot in the next like week and a half. And I'm happy to report, after playing a little bit a couple days ago and the last day, haven't gotten to play in the last 2 days because I have been in the middle of finalizing my move, so haven't gotten to play. But regardless, I'm sitting at about 170 LP right now, so feeling pretty good, winning a lot more games than I'm losing, climbing very quickly actually as well, which is very nice to see sort of the fruits of the labor pay off that quickly.
Hell yeah. My climb is not. I'm still in plat. Gonna be honest.
My climb is not. That's
Yeah.
all right. So you gotta, when you're burned out, you gotta take a break. This is great. We nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. We got both sides of the coin. For me, it was I sort of just I got a new game, and I got really into it for like a little over a week. So I sort of
game?
set aside Legends of Runeterra for a bit, and then right as I was starting to play again, we had a huge storm, and a tree knocked over the power lines in our neighborhood, and we were out of power for like almost a full 24 hours, and I couldn't play basically all of today and most of yesterday, and I finally got to play 3 games right before we started recording, and that is how the most I've played in the last week. But many more to come.
Listen to your body. Yeah, take a couple weeks off when you need them. Exactly. It's not all about being the first person to Masters. It's not about having the highest LP at any given time, right? It is about enjoying the time you're spending doing the things you want to do. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing.
Exactly.
All right, and I think that that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Champ Select. So if you are not a member of our Discord yet, you absolutely should be. That's where we get all of our questions for every week in case you want to ask us something. There's a link to that in the description of whatever platform you're listening to this on, as well as a link to all of our social media, which you should certainly be following. Without further ado, we will see you all on the next episode of Champ Select. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.